I had a different plan for this sermon, entirely different introduction, and then Iran happened last night, and I'm like, that's not going to work. I can, sometimes just pastorally, you just got to shake things up, change things up in light of what's happening in the world, and I did not want to come here with any triviality, anything that leaves us feeling like life isn't that big of a deal. No, it is. There's big things happening, and we need to be aware of that. Taking out those 3 nuclear sites, I don't know, we just don't know what's going to happen. It's another reminder of the unsettledness of this world, the fragility of life. Should be a reminder of that. Events like this should cause us to reflect even on our own lives, the temporality of our lives, the fragility of our lives, the uncertainty of our lives. You don't know when your life is going to come to an end. You don't know. God does. You don't. We were last night watching a fun, goofy movie with my kids called Angels in the Outfield. Have you ever seen that movie? Yeah, it's just so fun. These old movies are like, my kids, I'm like, you guys are missing out on life. These amazing movies, Terrible theology, no doubt, in that movie, but just a fun flick. And I had no clue that like a few hours before, Iran just got bombed. Just going on with life. And it's just a reminder of like what we feel often isn't what is reality in the grand scheme of things. The fragility, uncertainty about this life we should feel, because we should feel that fragility and uncertainty because of the certainty of death. Yet the ignorance of its timing. You don't know when you're going to die, so I ask you, how are you going to face it when it comes upon you, when you're approaching it? As we've been making our way through the book of Genesis, we've witnessed some amazing promises of God to a man named Abraham, a man who did not deserve to receive these promises, but by grace God gave them to this man who was very unworthy, but continues to prove God's grace in his life. One promise is that of offspring, that his offspring would inherit eternally a land of rest. That's a big theme in the book of Genesis. Yet the problem with this promise is that none of the original recipients of the promise would live to see the fulfillment of that promise. They're all going to die before the offspring of Abraham inherit the land. And that brings us to this passage this morning. Sarah, the matriarch of Israel, Abraham's wife, the one we've been following her journey all this time, Sarah dies. This is the first of those who receive the promise who die without seeing it fulfilled. And the question becomes, how is Abraham going to face the reality of the death of his own wife in light of God's promise of this land of eternal rest still yet unfulfilled? I want every one of us in here to face death, whether it's your own that's approaching, and for all of us, it is. You got 80 more years, big whoop, it's approaching. You got 8 more years, in the grand scheme of things, that's not much different. Whether it's your own death, or whether it's the death of someone else, how you approach it, I want you to approach it with faith. That's what Abraham did in this passage, and that's why we read from Hebrews chapter 11. These all died in faith. Died in faith, not having received the promises. What does it mean to die in faith? It means as you're taking your last breath, you're still believing in God and that He's going to fulfill all His promises that He made to His people. Because God promises a world to come for his people. A new heavens and a new earth, a new creation, the eternal land of rest. We can approach death in faith. That's what I want us to take away from this passage. I told you I'll give you the sermon points up front because they're not in the bulletin this morning. So here they are. This story unfolds in 3 scenes. We can call the first scene a death without the promise fulfilled. A death without the promise fulfilled. Secondly, scene 2, a deal for the promise to be fulfilled. A deal for the promise to be fulfilled. And then number 3, a down payment of the promise fulfilled. A death, a deal, and a down payment. The second scene really is the emphasis of this passage because it takes up most of this account. So we'll be spending most of our time there. And as we work through the story, I want to close with some implications for our lives. So that's where we're going. Scene number 1, a death without the promise fulfilled. Look at verse 1. Verse 1. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. It's interesting that Sarah is the only woman in all the Bible whose lifespan is mentioned, how long she lived. It's showing how important she is in the story of the Bible. It's a big deal that she died. Her son, Isaac, whom she had waited for, that miracle child, is probably about 37 years old at this point. You calculate the story. And he still remains unmarried, so she's not going to see grandchildren. She's not going to see the continuance of the promise of offspring. It's not going to be for another 3 years before he even gets married. Nor will she see the fulfillment of the land promise in her lifetime. She died. It's tragic. And I think the author intends for us to feel the tragedy of this death because he mentions the word die or dead 8 times in this account. Verse 2, Sarah died. Verse 3, Abraham rose up before his dead. Verse 4, let me bury my dead. Verse 6, bury your dead. Verse 8, bury my dead. Verse 11, bury your dead. Verse 13, bury my dead. Verse 15, bury your dead. It's this back and forth between Abraham and the Hittites. But just mentioning the word again and again and again, dead. Calling Sarah that. That's what they're referring to Sarah as. The dead. Kind of puts death right in your face. Making us feel the tragedy of it and also this tension of what would become of the promise for her. Did Sarah just miss out? Did you see where the author says Sarah died? Verse 2, at Hebron in the land of Canaan. So she died in the place that God promised would become the land of rest for the people of God. And Abraham is clinging to that hint of hope, even though he's mourning very deeply. It says in verse 2, he went in to mourn for her, probably went into her tent where her body lay, and he carried out the traditional mourning customs of the day, tearing garments, disheveling hair, cutting beard, putting dust on his head, fasting. He is filled with sorrow. But is that all he's filled with? Is that all we should be filled with when we face death? The main tension of this story is not, what's Abraham going to do now that his wife is gone? As sad as that is. The main tension of this story is, will Abraham still believe God's promise in the face of death, even in the loss of his own wife? And the next scene shows us he faces it in faith. So we move to scene number 2, calling it a deal for the promise to be fulfilled. Look at verse 3. Verse 3. And Abraham rose up from before his dead and said to the Hittites, I am a sojourner and foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Now, that helps us see the tension of the story. Did you see how Abraham refers to himself? He is a sojourner in the land, meaning he's not settled. He's a foreigner, meaning this land is not his home yet. Why is that a problem? On the face of it, the initial problem just seems to be that he's got no place to bury his wife. Because he doesn't own any property, so how's he going to be able to bury his wife there? But there's more going on here, because if Abraham wanted to, he could just go back to his homeland in Haran and bury her there, as difficult as it may be to take her body there. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to bury his wife here, in the land of Canaan. The place God promised that his offspring would one day possess as a whole. In fact, Abraham uses that very word, possession. He uses it in verse 2 when he says, "Give me property among you for a burying place." Property. Same word that God used in Genesis 17, verse 8, when God said to Abraham, "I will give to you and your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession." Property. It's the same word. I think Abraham is being very intentional here. He's saying, I want to own the burial site for my wife. Is that going to fly? Listen to the Hittites' response. Verse 5. The Hittites answered Abraham, "Hear us, my lord. You are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead." You can see the respect they have for Abraham, right? Calling him Lord, Prince of God. They recognize the favor of God upon Abraham's life. He's gained great honor amongst the peoples of this land. But notice what they offer him. The choicest of our tombs. Is that what Abraham asked for? Use one of our tombs, they say. It's a generous offer, but it's not what Abraham asked for, because he wanted to buy a piece of land to bury Sarah. They are offering just one of their own tombs to be used, not for purchase, but seemingly for a temporary usage. And this was a problem because Abraham wouldn't own the property. As one writer clarifies, after Sarah's body had decomposed, the Hittites would be able to use the tomb again. So Abraham doesn't want to put his wife's body in a Canaanite tomb where she would soon be forgotten. So what does he do? Look at verse 7. Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land. Let me just comment there. It's fascinating. He continues to refer to them as the people of the land. The land, that's the word that God keeps using to refer to what God's promise is for Abraham's offspring, yet other people now occupy that land. It's their land. Abraham knows it's not his yet. Look at verse 8. And he said to them, "If you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of the field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as property for a burial place." He's sticking to his guns, digging in his heels, and maybe even speaking a little bit more boldly, because he tells them, "Go get Ephron. You and I both know this guy who has a cave in this big old field. I just want that cave at the very end of the field." And just to kind of mention Ephron's name means that he had some kind of social standing among the Hittites. He was well known. And Abraham is saying, I want him. I know he's got some land, and I want to buy it from him. It's a bold request. Why does he want Ephron's cave at Machpelah, or Machpelah, however you pronounce it? This is not just some random place. As we said, Sarah died in Hebron. This cave is there in Hebron, this is a place where Abraham encountered God on many occasions. It was the first place where he kind of settled after separating from Lot in chapter 13. It was a place where he built an altar to worship the Lord later in chapter 13. It's the place where the two angels and God himself show up at his doorstep to reiterate the promise of a son that would come in the next year. This is a very important place for Abraham, a place that for him signifies the faithfulness of God to his promises. And he wants his wife not only to be buried there, but he wants to own the burial site. Why? It's not about gaining equity. This is just one cave in the back end of a field. This is not much. Abraham, for him, owning that piece of land would function like a down payment of the promise of getting the whole land. This is an act of faith on his part. The question is, would Ephron be willing to sell it? And we move to that encounter in verse 10. Look at verse 10. Now Ephron was sitting among the Hittites, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites, all who went in at the gate of the city. So you can see this is a legal setting. It's a public setting. It's at the gate of the city. That's where legal matters were discussed. So it's almost like a court scene, if you will, with all these witnesses around to see this exchange and see what comes about from it. And the question is, will Abraham get what he asks for? Look at verse 11. What Ephron says, implied Abraham already asked, or they entreated Ephron on behalf of Abraham. And here's his answer, verse 11, no. No, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the sight of the sons of my people, I give it to you, bury your dead. What's he saying? Take it. It's yours. And take not only the cave, take the whole field. I'm giving it as a free gift. He's being generous. He seems to have a good heart, this Ephron guy. What's the problem? The property would not, though, belong to Abraham. So is he going to take that offer? Verse 12. Then Abraham bowed down before the people of the land. Notice his humility. Verse 13. And he said to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, but if you will hear me, I give the price of the field. Accept it from me that I may bury my dead there. I give the price. What is he saying? I want to pay for it. Let me pay for it. He doesn't want it as a gift. He's willing to even take the whole field. He said, I'll buy the whole field. Just let me pay for it. Now, it's weird, this exchange that takes place with Ephron. It's hard to interpret, but I think I know where it's going. But if you think of how generous people typically are when their free gift is rejected. No, I couldn't take that. What do they tend to do? Well, either they just keep it and say, I insist you take it, or they get creative in trying to force your hand to take it as a free gift, right? I don't know if you ever known someone like that, or you've done something like that where it's like you offer a free gift, like, no, I couldn't take that. Well, if you don't do that, then I'm gonna whatever, and it's like an ultimatum, and it's just a way of you forcing your generosity upon them so that they will actually receive the gift. I think Ephron does something like that. Look at verse 14. Verse 14, Ephron answered Abraham, my Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver, what is that between you and me? Bury your dead. Okay, again, before we try to figure out what his response is exactly, notice again he uses that word land. For him, it's just a piece of land. But that's the same word God has been using again and again and again in his promise to Abraham. Chapter 12, verse 7, to your offspring I give this land. Chapter 13, verse 14, lift up your eyes, look from the place where you are northward, southward, eastward, westward, for all the land that you will see I will give to you and your offspring forever. Chapter 15, verse 18, to your offspring I give this land. Chapter 17, verse 8, I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession. For Ephron, it's just a piece of land. For Abraham, it's a piece of the promise. So what is Ephron's response? What's he saying? Look there again at verse 15. My Lord, listen to me, he says, a piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? There's different ways of reading this. He could be saying, fine, okay, you want to buy it. The price of the land is not an issue for us. It's not a huge loss for me. It's just a piece of land, big whoop. And the money isn't a big deal to you, whatever. Buy it, bury your dead, that's fine. I think it's possible, that's what he's saying. The only thing that gives me some trouble with that is that 400 shekels was a lot of money for a piece of land. And so I had a hard time with the interpretation that said, this ain't that much, whatever, not a big deal, just go ahead and buy it. I just don't think that's the case. For reference, in 2 Samuel chapter 24, King David purchased the land that he would build on the temple, on, for only 50 shekels. 50 versus 400. That's a big difference. I think Ephron is intentionally inflating this price. It's like 7 pounds worth of silver. I think he didn't think Abraham could pay it. And so I think he's saying, okay, you won't receive it as a gift? Fine. And he just names a crazy price to force Abraham just to receive it as a gift. But Abraham, what does he do? Again, I don't think he thinks Abraham could pay this because it's a lot of money. What does Abraham do? Verse 16. Abraham listened to Ephron. And Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver according to the weights current among the merchants. He pays it up. Fine. Psh, here you go. You know, like, where did all that money come from? Like, you're just some sojourner. You don't even own any property. Like, where did all this come from? Why does he pay that amount? That's a lot of money for a small piece of land. But I do want to ask, before we ask the why question, why'd you do that, Abraham? Keep haggling. Because that would have been customary in that day to try to bring the price down. He didn't care. He just wanted it. Before we ask why, I think we know why. We have a hint. Let's ask how. How was he able to pay this amount? God sovereignly, providentially worked it out through a series of events in Abraham's life for him to get to this place at the moment his wife dies, for him to be able to pay this much for this small piece of land. God did it. How? It began in chapter 12. In spite of Abraham lying about his wife when he went down to Egypt, he said, this is my sister, because he was afraid they were going to kill her because of him. God put in the heart of the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, to send off Abraham, quote, with sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. Which is why chapter 13 opens this way. Abraham was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. Through what looked like, it was his unfaithfulness, God, in spite of that, faithfully worked to provide all of this for Abraham through a pagan king. Then in chapter 14, if you remember, Abraham goes on this rescue mission to retrieve his nephew Lot, who'd been captured by these other kings, and God gave him victory in a battle that he just simply shouldn't have won. He was outnumbered. He won, took some of the spoils of war, though he would not be willing, if you remember, to take the spoils from the king of Sodom. But it seemed maybe he got a little bit more there. And then finally in chapter 20, a repeat event from Egypt happens in Gerar with the king Abimelech. Remember this? Where the same thing happens. It says, Sarah's my sister, don't kill me. Abimelech finds out, God sends a plague to protect them. And Abimelech says, what are you doing? He gives Sarah back, and he then just sends him off with a bunch of stuff. God sovereignly worked it out for Abraham to pay this crazy amount for this small piece of land. Just think about that for your life. Like, there are so many things that are outside of your control that you have no power over, and yet you see where the Lord has brought you to this day. He's brought you to this day. Like how has He provided for you in ways that you couldn't have through all these series of events that are outside of your control? This is why I'm so convinced that God is sovereign over all things. Like, Abraham would not have been able to pay a dime of this had God not done what He did in his life. We can trust the Lord. That's how He did it. But why did he do it? Why did he do this? This is not about real estate equity. This is about faith. Abraham believed God would fulfill his promise to give his offspring all this land. And this piece that he just acquired from Ephron is a small taste of that greater promise. He wanted his wife there. He didn't want her buried somewhere else. He wanted her buried there. She died before the promise was fulfilled, but by this act, Abraham is demonstrating, I think implicitly, he believes his wife will rise from the dead in the place that she will inherit forever with God's people. And this takes us to scene number 3. Scene number 3. We can call it a down payment of the promise fulfilled. Look at verse 17. Verse 17. So the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field with the cave that was in it, and all the trees that were in the field throughout its whole area, was made over to Abraham as a possession. Just you see that setup, right? Just how big of a deal this is. Describing what he gets, it was made over to him as a possession in the presence of the Hittites, before all who went in at the city, at the gate of his city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Now that's the second time, verse 19 is the second time the author, Moses, wants the readers to know that Sarah not only died, but she was buried in the land of Canaan, because this land would become theirs. Look at verse 20. The field and the cave that was in it were made over to Abraham as property for a burying place by the Hittites. And you can see that word again, property. This idea of possession. It's going to be a word that God will use later on with his people Israel regarding the reiteration of the promised land. In Deuteronomy 32, he says, I will give this land for your possession. So when the original readers heard this, it's like, oh, God promised that to us as well. And look what he provided for Abraham to get this possession. Surely he will provide for us. Abraham believed this with all his heart. This cave, this little piece of real estate that occupied the body, this tomb where the body of his wife laid, served as a tangible reminder that God would keep his promise to give them the whole land. Abraham faced death in faith, and we can too. Let me remind us of another tomb that serves for us as a tangible reminder that God will keep his promise to his people to bring them home. This tomb is no longer occupied, is it? It is the tomb of Jesus Christ, and when Jesus walked out of that burial place, he secured the promise of bringing his people home. This is what the good news of the gospel is. I want you to see how this passage connects to the ultimate fulfillment. All this talk in Genesis about this land of rest is ultimately fulfilled in our home in heaven, the new creation. How do we get there? Well, God made promises, but how did he secure those promises? He sent his son Jesus to do for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. We don't deserve to go to that land of rest. It's going to be a place of perfect paradise. What makes you think an unclean sinner like you are allowed to be there? It's only because Jesus walked in the way we couldn't walk, in absolute perfection. He stepped in our place, living as we couldn't live, and then dying for our sins and being placed in a tomb. He died. He took the punishment. That tomb is a reminder of two things. The tomb of Jesus is a reminder of two things. It's a reminder that your sin got buried with him. That when he died for you, he took on your sins on himself, and they're there. Your old self is dead there. And then it's a reminder of this. When he walked out of that tomb, that means you have new life. And there's the hope of eternal life with him. And so if you're not a Christian, I would just ask you, like, what hope do you have? Well, how can you face your certain death? How are you going to face it? You can face it in faith. You know why? Because Jesus walked out of the tomb. What a tangible reminder that he will bring us home. Now, in light of that, we got a few minutes. In the last few moments, let me just close with a few implications for us, okay, from this story. A few implications that we can glean for our lives. Number one, let me encourage us to face the reality of death. Face the reality of death. Don't ignore it. Don't avoid it. In fact, reflect on it. This account opens with some very sobering words, if we notice them. It says, Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. That's just sobering. That's what it's going to say in your obituary. These were the years of the life of... That's it. Those were the years you had on this earth. That's sobering, isn't it? To know you have a certain amount of years. You don't know what they are, but it is fixed. These years and not a second longer. When you die, that's your life here on this earth. You will live the allotted time and not a second more. Reflect on that. Too often, we ignore the reality of death, whether it's, just think of the ways we do it. Anti-aging creams, hair coloring products, various supplements. None of those things are bad in themselves. Keep using them, it's fine. But again, honestly, there's nothing inherently wrong about those things at all. They can be good. I mean, medicine and things like this. But just kind of reflect on the motive of your heart. Could, in our use of these good things in this life, could it reveal just this subtle motive in our hearts that we're trying to avoid facing the reality of the inevitability of death? I've quoted a guy named Matt McCullough several times. He wrote a book called Remember Death. He also wrote the one I recommended earlier called Remember Heaven, and that one already got snagged. Annie's like, where is that? And she goes and grabs it on the front. Well done, Annie. Great books, Remember Death, and then a part two, if you will, Remember Heaven. Here's what he quotes. Here's a quote from Remember Death. He says this: in American culture, we put clothes on our dead as if they are alive. We place our dead in soft and sturdy coffins for comfort and protection as if they are alive. We manipulate their bodies and cover them in makeup and even set their faces with pleasant expressions so that they look like they're alive. Behind the quest for a lifelike appearance is perhaps an attempt to deny the deathly reality. Now again, he's not indicting the way we do funerals in our culture in themselves. He's pressing into the motives of our heart. What are we doing? We're trying to act as if this didn't happen. The death isn't real. And he asks that question, when was the last time you thought of the fact that you will die? He says death is a fundamental human experience uniting all humans across time and space and race and class. Even if your life plays out in precisely the way you imagined for yourself in your wildest dreams, death will steal away everything that you have and destroy everything you accomplished. If we want to live with resilient joy, a joy that is tethered not to the shifting circumstances, but to the rock-solid accomplishments of Jesus Christ, we must look honestly at the problem of death. Facing death in faith will affect the way you live your life now. And it was faith in the face of his wife's death that compelled Abraham to be so persistent in owning this piece of the promised land. Reflect on death, don't avoid it. Implication number 2, discipline yourself to focus on heaven. Discipline yourself to focus on heaven. Abraham's persistence is because he was looking to the promise that would be fulfilled after his wife's death, even after his own death. He was just like locked in. God's going to keep his promise. How do we be locked in? We got to be disciplined to keep thinking about what's to come. Looking to that promise of the new creation. Because sometimes we get so rooted in this world, don't we? And we forget, man, we've got heaven awaiting us. Again, here's McCullough from the book Remember Heaven. He says, by some estimates, and listen, I'm preaching to myself here very much. This is very convicting. He says, by some estimates, adults are spending on average as many as 4 to 6 hours per day scrolling on their phones. When you consider how much of that usage happens in spurts, spread out here and there in the middle of whatever else we're supposed to be doing, we're spending all our waking moments drawn to our phones. That makes it tough to set our minds on anything at all, much less things above and things to come. There's one example of possible ways in which we're distracted from being disciplined to set our minds on heaven. It's very convicting. I just want you to think about in what ways perhaps your own phone has too much control over you, rooting you more and more in the temporary comforts and pleasures of this world. McCullough continues. He says, this cut to the heart. Listen to this statement. How we spend our moments is how we spend our lives. Do you want your life to be measured by how many fantasy football titles you won? Or how many limited time deals you grabbed? Or how many likes you got on that family photo? Or how many days in a row you nailed the Wordle challenge? Or I would add, how many cat videos you watched? Discipline yourself to be heavenly minded. Read books on heaven. I just can't recommend that book highly enough. Remember Heaven by Matt McCullough. Randy Alcorn wrote a book called Heaven. I've not read it yet. It's on my to-do list, but I've heard good things. Make it a part of your daily prayers. How often do you pray, Lord, help me to long for heaven? Help me not to feel so rooted in this world and just be so bogged down. Like when you think about eternity and what's to come, it puts the little problems we have here in this life in perspective, doesn't it? It's not that big of a deal in light of what's to come. Plead with God that you might have more of a longing for heaven. Or try this, and this takes us to implication number 3. Implication number 3. Look for glimpses in this life of the life to come. The purchase of that cave on the part of Abraham was a glimpse of glory, a glimpse of the fulfillment of that promise. And I think we just need to discipline ourselves to look for these things. They're all around us. God is so kind to give us little tastes of the glory that is to come. And we just miss out on them all the time because we're so distracted. So distracted. You ever seen the movie Soul? You ever seen that movie? Oh, you need to see that movie. It's a cartoon Pixar movie. It is so good in this sense. This guy is living for one thing, and that's making music. And his whole meaning and worth is just wrapped up in this one thing. It's a good thing, but it's his whole identity. And as the movie goes on, it reveals in his focus on this one thing where his whole identity is wrapped up, he's missing all the beauties around him. Just the little pleasures of this life that God gives us, little tastes of glory to come. Like eating pizza. There's a great scene of someone eating the pizza in there, and they're just like, oh, I never had a piece of pizza. Anyway, you need to watch the movie. But we get so distracted. Again, listen to McCullough. He says, I read somewhere years ago of a young man who found a $5 bill on the street and who from that time on never lifted his eyes when walking. In the course of years, he accumulated 29,516 buttons, 54,172 pins, 12 cents, a bent back, and a miserable disposition. You get the point? He was so preoccupied with getting that next $5 bill, he was just missing out on life, and he was getting nothing. McCullough continues, he couldn't see the radiance of the sunlight, the sheen of the stars, the smile on the face of his friends, or the blossom of springtime, for his eyes were in the gutter. There are too many Christians like that. We have important duties on earth, but we must never allow them to preoccupy us in such a way that we forget who we are or where we are going. Look for glimpses of glory. Jonathan Edwards said it like this: to go to heaven, fully to enjoy God, is infinitely better than the most pleasant accommodations here. Fathers and mothers, husbands, wives, or children, or the company of earthly friends are but shadows, but the enjoyment of God is the substance. These are but scattered beams, but God is the sun. These are but streams, but God is the fountain. These are but drops, but God is the ocean. And no doubt, his point there is saying, these little pleasures you have here, nothing compared to what's to come. But don't miss the subtle secondary point that he's making. These little things here are small tastes and reminders of the great joy we get in God forever in heaven. Look for them. Go out today and just, like some of us have just lost our awe of God. I know I get in seasons like that. Like, oh, the problems are too big, and and I'm not seeing, like, man, there's a massive sun that's just beaming down on me. Look at the blossoms of the tree. That's God. It's beauty. Look for him, and then long for the glory that's to come. So, Kenny, you can face death in faith. Why? Because God promises this new world to come for us. So face it in faith. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that you would help us to have our faith increased. And as our faith is increased, our awe is increased of you. Help us to know who we are and what is awaiting us. Help us to know the promises that you have lavished upon us, and may we look to that reward that day. And thank you for all this that's been accomplished for us through Christ, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen.